Alright, my friends, welcome again. I'm Dave from MMYAY, so let's not waste any more time and get into it. Alright, just quickly, before we get into the Lesnar Hunt fight for UFC 200, I'd just like to touch on the passing of Kimbo Slice. Kevin Ferguson, known to the MMA world as Kimbo Slice, passed away yesterday aged 42 from apparent heart failure. Whether a fan of Kimbo or not, he was well known and well liked in the community. And it's a tragedy to see someone pass away still in the twilight of their fight career, with many more experiences to come. On behalf of MMYAY, I would like to send condolences to the family and friends of Kimbo or Kevin, and we wish them all the best. Okay, now moving on, we'll get into Brock and Mark Hunt. Okay, so you've definitely heard the news of the unannounced fight, the extra fight that seemed to be due, the fight that definitely wasn't GSP doing cartwheels or Diaz McGregor 2. It's actually going to be Brock Lesnar and Mark Hunt. Brock Lesnar. GSP coming back actually makes more sense, and that guy's off chasing aliens and trying not to get abducted, and we don't know where he's been for the last year and a half. But Brock Lesnar, for the uninformed who've been living under a rock, was the college amateur wrestler, and then he turned fake wrestler, turned NFL tackle, turned mixed martial artist. He then won the UFC heavyweight title in an incredibly thin division in his fourth professional fight. He then developed diverticulitis, and had half of his intestines removed. He lost his last two fights in the UFC, finished with a record of 5-3, and then headed back to the WWE. Now, that's not the worst record, and he did manage to defend the heavyweight title twice, which is more than Fabricio Verdum, Junior Dos Santos, Frank Mir, and he managed to cement himself a legacy within the UFC. And yeah, I mean a legacy. Now, legacies seem to work a lot better when you leave them as a legacy. I think people overlook a lot of how terrible Brock's performances were. He was lay and pray champion, his fights were boring, and when he wasn't able to take opponents down quickly, he was quite susceptible to taking a beating. But I know, he was huge and he was from the WWE, so that's pretty much guaranteed dollars in the pockets of the UFC, the Fertittas, Dana White, and the rest of the brass. So it looks like he's coming back. And Mark Hunt's going to be the one to lay on a beatdown. Now, Freak Show is huge in Japan. And by Freak Show, I mean fights where opponents have 10 weight classes from each other and guys with records of 20-0 fight others on debut. And you can definitely soccer kick the shit out of the guy on the ground. And Mark Hunt's no stranger to Japan. He's had 8 fights in Pride, and there was another one in Dream, as well as K1 kickboxing over in Japan as well. Mark Hunt, who in the UFC is not in the UFC, in MMA as a whole is 12-10-1. Hasn't had the most storied career, and at one point the UFC did offer to buy out the remaining fights on his Pride contract, and that way they wouldn't have had to deal with him at all. But the New Zealand-born, Australian-residing Samoan has been able to turn it around in the last few fights, and he's gone 3-2 in his last 5. And those 2 losses were only coming to Verdum and Stipe Miocic, the former and current heavyweight champs, respectively. Hunt also had a Fight of the Year contender in Brisbane against Bigfoot towards the end of 2013. Pretty sure we all remember that fight. I actually probably should have looked up if that actually won, whether that was the Fight of the Year, but it was definitely well up there, definitely in the top 5. So, I guess what I'm saying is Hunt's been doing pretty well for himself in the last couple of years, and he's taken what I believed was a sinking ship, and he's turned it around somewhat. However, the problem is he's never been good on the ground. In fact, most of his losses come from submissions when an opponent is able to take him down. And while Hunt is focused on this part of the game and is much, much harder to take down than his early Pride days, it can still be done, and this is where Brock, the lay and pray master, will be able to strike and wrestle hump his way to victory. This is a one-off fight where the WWE have made it clear that Brock will be back working for them in no time. I think he's meant to be back at SummerSlam, which I think is a month after UFC 200. And this seems to make no sense now. So I suppose the important thing here is that Hunt has a great chance of winning on the feet, especially because Brock probably hasn't been training as much MMA as he'd like to, and he's probably almost certainly going to dominate on the ground. So we've got Mark Hunt on the feet, Brock on the ground. And, I mean, we can look a little further into breaking this fight down when we get a little bit closer and once we get past the Wonder Boy McDonald fight. But what I want to look into today, and the real question here is why? Why this fight's going ahead, why it's been sanctioned, why anyone's even agreed to it. I mean, I can understand Brock taking this fight because it will be worth a lot of money to it. And I suppose, at the end of the day, that's also why Hunt's interested, because it certainly doesn't improve his ranking if he wins. I mean, Mark Hunt's gone from fighting for Doom in Mexico City, Mexico, for the interim title, to fighting Lesnar in a circus tent at UFC 200. I mean, Mark Hunt has limited fights left, and with another couple of wins against the best in the division, he has every chance of getting one more crack at the big time before he's done. But fighting Lesnar does not help this case. I mean, in fact, what does a loss here spell? If Hunt loses this fight, he's essentially lost to a fake wrestler who jumped across for a one fight, once in a lifetime return on minimal training. He's gone, and then he went back to play make-believe with his buddies back in the WWE. However, if Hunt wins, surely this will be written off in the same way. I mean, all he's done is beaten a bloke who hasn't stepped foot in the octagon for 4.5 years and probably hasn't been training. This has to be the dump truck to rival all dump trucks for carrying money. And I mean, it wasn't just backed up to the door. It must have been dropped in the kitchen because this fight just does not make sense. On top of that, this fight means nothing and should be lower on the card as well. I mean, this is the co-main event or your fight before your main event. I'm not sure exactly how it's being marketed, but it's definitely up there. It'll definitely be Lesnar right up there on the poster. And I mean, the Tate Nunes fight, the Aldo Edgar fight, which are both title belts. I mean, Aldo Edgar is for the interim, but for all intensive purposes, these are title fights, and they've been pushed down the card for this shit show. Does anyone else feel like this is not too much better than what Bellator have been doing lately? I mean, the UFC are going to love it, and it's going to put them back on track to have their highest pay-per-view numbers to date. Which, I mean, this is the whole goal of UFC 200, isn't it? UFC 100 previously had great figures, so we've come another 100, we must be here. But this isn't 100 events. This is another 200 events with all your fight nights. But I mean, this is what they're trying to build it up to be. And it's obviously, their pay-per-view numbers will have taken a hit with the loss of the Diaz-McGregor 2 fight. But at the end of the day, we're all going to watch. And frankly, I hope it's a fun fight. I mean, this could be a great lead up to number 1 versus number 2, Jones versus Cormier in the main event, which is a true main event. Something we've been waiting for since Jones had his troubles and Cormier was injured. But I just thought I'd give you something to think about, my friends. And, let me know in the comments if you agree or disagree. But if you're feeling me, make sure to hit the subscribe button and like the video. I mean, as well as follow the Facebook page, check out the blog at MMYAY.com, and add me on Twitter. My handle is @DaveMMYAY. All the details are just in your box down below, and I'll see you guys soon. Thanks, guys.